Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where every week here on MMA Junkie, we take you on a quick spin through the week's news. We've got the Vegas crew back on deck this week, John Morgan, plus MMA Junkie Radio's gorgeous George and Goze. So let's get him back on the clock and get things underway. Let's kick things off with who else? Conor McGregor. He sparked plenty of discussion online this week after tweeting his take on MMA's GOAT debate. Naturally, he's placed himself pretty prominently on that list and said that he plans to stand above the rest in the not too distant future. But guys, the question here is, what makes a fighter the greatest of all time? Is it tenure? Is it the number of wins? Is it title defenses? Or is there some other X factor in your list? How do you define GOAT in this instance, and who gets your nod as MMA's greatest of all time? This is a big one to kick off, and time's tight. We've got 3 minutes on the clock. John, kick us off.
It's a big one, man. Like you said, we could go for hours on this one. Many a cold beverage has been consumed debating this topic, right? But for me, I think what you said there, the tenure, the length of time, the downing people and dominating a vision over time. And so for me, I got to go with Jon Jones. I mean, Conor McGregor, one of the greatest stories in the history of the sport, absolutely one of the biggest stars ever, the biggest star, in fact. And I think he definitely deserves to be talked about in the list. But, man, when you're really talking about the greatest of all time, I think Conor could get there. But he needs more time. He needs more tenure. He needs to beat more contenders, dominate division. You look at Jon Jones. I mean, he became a champion in 2011. He's got more title defenses than anybody in history. And think about it. He'd have even more if he didn't have to keep winning the damn title back that he never lost. So for me, look at the names, the people that he's beat. It's got to be Jon Jones. I know some people are critics of what he does outside the cage. We're talking about what happens inside the octagon. And for me, Johnny Bones is the greatest of all time.
It's so tricky to go between eras, Goze. It's looking at someone back in the early days and comparing them with someone in modern era. It's so tricky. How do you piece it together, and how do you assess the greatest of all time?
Well, when it comes down to this argument, you really, really have to nitpick because they're all great fighters. For me, one of the biggest things is, did you fight the greatest fighters that were available to you at the time? And when you did that and you got your title, how many times did you defend it? Because when we look back in history, there's going to be a lot of title holders in every weight class. Hell, there'll be a lot of champs. Even that's not as rare as what we used to think it was. So really, you have to separate these guys, and I think where it comes down to is holding that title. How long did you did it? How long did you do it? For me, I still have George St Pierre, but he's barely hanging on by a thread. I still have him. I don't know if it'll be that much longer, but the only critique I can have for him is maybe he didn't finish a lot of guys. But if you look at the guys that he fought at that time, not a lot of people were finishing those guys either. So that's my pick.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one to piece together, George. The sport has evolved so much from the days of UFC 1, and we've had so many superstar champions and great athletes over the years. What's your take?
Yeah, I like Goze said, you have to split hairs, man, when you get in these types of arguments with people, or discussions, I should say. Records, titles defenses, win streaks, quality of opponents. But for some reason, I always zero in on title defenses. Like John said, Bones Jones is at the top, man. You got to take him really, really serious. If you leave him out, I mean, you shouldn't even be discussing this topic. George St Pierre, Goze nailed it. Same thing. He's got some qualities that Jones doesn't have. Two of them that I like is, one of them is he went out of his weight class to win another title. I mean, granted, it was just one stop, but still, he faced the number one guy at the time, won the fight, finished it. No title defense, but still, that was impressive. He rarely lost rounds, and he also just didn't have any of those infractions with commissions or USADA that leave that little bit of shred of doubt, So it's a two-horse race, but I give the nod to GSP. Although Cejudo, Khabib, Nunes, man, they're charging up.
Yeah, there are so many. For me, it's 1A, 1B, Mighty Mouse and Johnny Bones. But someone who wants to be at the top of that list eventually is the aforementioned Conor McGregor. He's a man with options right now. So put yourself in the shoes, Sean Shelby's shoes, to coin a phrase, and see if you can book the next fight for the UFC's most bankable star. What should the UFC do with Conor McGregor? Play fantasy matchmaker for us, guys. Book his next fight. I don't know what you want to think. I don't know. I don't want to know, excuse me, put my teeth in, what the UFC will do. I want to know what you would do. George, we've got 3 minutes. Kick us off.
Conor McGregor versus Jorge Masvidal, the BMF. Let's do it. It's such a huge fight at the gate, and I think it would bring a lot of fans. And right now, our fans have nowhere to go. Imagine the spotlight on mixed martial arts that night. So McGregor, I just don't feel like right now is a contender at 55. I mean, he's probably a fight or two away. I know he's privileged and gets to jump to the front of the queue. And then with Masvidal, you know, of course I'd love him to fight Usman. That's really what I want, you know, for him. But you asked the question for McGregor, so why not have him fight Jorge Masvidal? If that can't happen, then give me him versus Nate Diaz. That trilogy needs to be settled at some point. Why not now? And lastly, I guess, you know, maybe versus Tony Ferguson, if we're just really looking to build him up as a contender for the winner of Gaethje and Khabib. I mean, I think all roads go through Tony Ferguson. And lastly, if he was ever going to box, I guess it's now, because I don't want him to impede the progress of Hooker and Oliveira and Makhachev and Fajeda and all those others that are working hard.
Well, there you go, Goze. George has nicked pretty much everyone's answers, but what's yours? Narrow it down to one for us.
Sorry. Who's left on the roster? I mean, I guess, listen, it's so funny because the lightweight division right now is kind of like the most cemented it's ever been, with knowing it's going to be Khabib and Justin next. But at the same time, it couldn't be more up in the air because of what's going on with this pandemic, what's going on in Khabib's personal life. So really, almost all the options are out there on the table. I like what George said. The BMF title, I think that makes sense. What you're looking for with Conor McGregor right now is sort of a placeholder type fight. And that's something where if you were to fight a Masvidal at welterweight for the BMF, I don't know that he loses much stock in a fight like that if he were to lose. And then you have your Nate Diaz. It's between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. I would say if there's ever a time that you want to do the Nate Diaz fight, it's probably now. I think you could pull it off. The only problem is with Conor McGregor, do you want to do it in front of nobody? That is the big problem, is a type of fight like that, a type of fighter like that. I don't know if you want to do that in front of 0 people. And I honestly don't believe that he wants to do it that way. But if I had to pick someone, I think it's Nate Diaz and Masvidal, those two right there.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one, John. He's got loads of options. I mean, Ali Abdelaziz, just today, I think the news has come out that he's up for Kamaru Usman taking on Conor McGregor next if Masvidal ends up taking a different route and going the Nate Diaz rematch route. What do you reckon?
I figure we just bring George back and let him rattle off a few more names, man. No, listen, for me, I go a different way. Give me Justin Gaethje, man. You know, listen, I hate to talk about, you know, kind of some negative thoughts. We don't know what's going on with Khabib and his family right now. I don't know if that September date that he was talking about is going to work. So why not Justin Gaethje? Have Conor come in, fight for the interim title. Stylistically, you know it's going to be a banger. You know Conor wants that rematch if he wins. There you go. Then you get your Conor Khabib too, and he actually earned it.
Hitting time like a pro. John Morgan keeping the show on the rails. Top man. Someone else we want to talk about in this lightweight division is a man who just fought and lost. Tony Ferguson. What's going to happen with him next? The rest of the lightweight division is gradually beginning to shake itself out. Khabib and Gaethje look like they're going to meet each other a bit later this year. Dustin Poirier looks like he's going to take on Dan Hooker. But where does that leave Tony Ferguson? What's next for El Kukui as he looks to get himself back in the mix? We've got 3 minutes on the clock. Goze, lead us off.
You know who it comes down to, guys? I want the matchmaking in this one not to be done by the UFC. I want it to be done by Chael Sonnen. I want to see him get some time off and then gradually come back, because that last fight was pretty damn brutal. And he was in a camp for a very long time. So what I would like to see is a submission underground. Get him in there grappling a little bit, then bring him back into the fold. But if I had to pick an MMA fight for him to come back to, I kind of like Charles Oliveira. I think that would be a fun fight. I think it's the definition of a scrap. It's going to be a scrap on the feet. It's going to be a scrap on the ground. I think it'd be a great time. So if I had to do UFC, it would be that. But I'd like to see Tony gradually come back. And I think he can do that maybe using submission underground.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I think a bit of time away from the cage wouldn't hurt. But if he's going to get back in there before the end of the year, John, what do you reckon? Who should he take on next?
Well, that's an interesting take. When you mentioned Chael Sonnen, I didn't know what direction he was going with that. I like that. You know, I agree too, man. You know, Tony Ferguson, and I don't think we're just talking about the damage he took in that fight. We're not. I think we're talking about the long buildup. You know, he admitted how long the camp was, the preparation, the mental strain of what he had to go through with all the starts and stops of that fight coming together. So I do like the idea of a little bit of time away for Tony Ferguson, both mentally and physically, to just recharge a little bit. That said, the guy is still right at the very top of the division. So I don't really want to cop out right now, but I will say that I don't think that the name exists at this moment. What I think it needs to be is a loser of kind of one of these upcoming matches. I mean, Charles Oliveira, that is a great matchup as well, but he's on a big winning streak. You know, and I don't know if it'd get Tony the respect that he deserves. I think Charles flies under the radar a little bit. So I think maybe the loser of one of these upcoming matches coming up might make sense. But listen, Tony Ferguson, to me, 2 fights away from another title shot. That's all he needs. So he needs that kind of name. It needs to be right up at the top of the division because, listen, man, he was there for so long. This was a crazy situation he was involved in. He doesn't need to be too far down. 2 fights and another title shot.
Yeah, he had an incredible win streak, obviously leading into that Justin Gaethje fight, and obviously that one didn't go his way. But he's only 1 loss off a huge win streak, so he's still very much a factor. George, where does he go here? Does he take another fight straight in there against the top contender, or you want to build him back up?
You know, I understand what both guys are saying. With Tony Ferguson, he's such a huge name at the top of 155 that Oliveira, that doesn't really get the juices flowing, probably for Tony and for the fans who feel like, well, he's right there. How do we position himself right back, in title talk? So he could maybe take that time off, like Goze said, and catch the guy coming off a loss in Khabib versus Gaethje, because he pretty much know. I think we can all accept that McGregor will get the winner, and that would allow him time to recuperate. However, recently Ngannou took on Rosenstruck, and there was probably that difference in rankings, in stature within the division, that maybe Tony does do his duty of putting a young guy over the same way guys put him over when he was coming up. It's just the process, that veterans do have to go through sometimes. So I like both ideas from both guys. And other than that, I mean, maybe Poirier or Kai Iaquinta, veteran names.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like to see him just take the rest of this year off, completely refresh, come back completely fresh and ready to go in 2021. But ready to go this weekend, back home in Las Vegas, commission approval pending, is UFC on ESPN 9 at the UFC Apex. A pivotal welterweight bout is going to headline the card. Tyron Woodley makes his return to the octagon as he takes on Gilbert Burns in a vital fight for both men at 170 pounds. It's a big fight, but is victory for either man this weekend big enough to land the winner a title shot? We got 3 minutes on the clock. John, start us off.
Man, I am looking forward to this event at the UFC Apex. I mean, we've seen cards there, but to see an actual full UFC card inside the Apex, going to be a unique experience. And to answer your question, I say absolutely. This is the #1 contender fight. However, you got to wait for Leon Edwards first, man. Come on. Get Rocky his due, man. The guy's on an 8-fight winning streak. His last loss was to the champ, Conor Usman. He's not getting the respect he deserves. And he had his own #1 contender fight lined up before this damn pandemic ruined everything from him. Don't let him take that away from him. So, yeah, I think this is a key matchup. I know that, Gilbert Burns is very new to the division, but look at the success he's had, and then you couple that with everything that he had already done before. I think he's right there. And, of course, Tyron Woodley's resume speaks for itself. And if he's staying as busy as he says he wants to, man, it could be really exciting. So, absolutely, this could be a #1 contender fight, but don't jump ahead of Leon Edwards. That man deserves his title shot.
Yeah, as a fellow Brit, I can certainly see that argument. He should really be in there fighting instead of Gilbert Burns, in my opinion. But pandemic getting in the way. George, whoever wins this fight, I mean, Woodley, former champion, he could be straight in there. Gilbert Burns knocks him over. He's going to be screaming title shot. So if you're the UFC, how'd you book the winner?
Well, let's take both scenarios. If Burns wins, and we'll call it an upset because here in Vegas he is the underdog. But if he wins, I don't think he's next for Usman or the winner of Usman versus fill in the blank, which I think is still Masvidal until we hear otherwise. If it's Woodley, however, then Woodley has a strong case, and I hate to say this, but you carry so much momentum when you get a finish, when you grab the mic and everyone's hanging on your every word, and you can sell it right then and there. I've seen it happen in light heavyweight with Santos, Reyes, Blachowicz. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a what have you done for me lately type of scenario. So I would think Woodley, knowing that Dana White has a possible option for Masvidal, needs to go in there and do some business, and he'll probably get a title shot off of that.
Yeah, it's pretty much a logjam up there at 170 right now. There's a lot of big names sort of jockeying for position, and a certain Conor McGregor might fancy his chances as well. What do you reckon, Goze? Is the winner of this going to get any sniff of a belt in his next fight?
I think the scenarios are a little different for each guy, but really there's a lot of mini battles in this fight. There's winning, but there's also winning impressively, and winning impressively is what these guys need to do. Tyron Woodley, with the resume that he has, when we talk GOATs of the welterweight division, he's up there in those talks. So if he can get a devastating, brutal knockout and show everybody he's back, then I think he could be next. But if Gilbert Burns were to get a win and it were devastating, I think he would be right there, but I don't know that he can overtake everyone else. So I think not only is the win important, how they do it, but also when they pick up the mic and what they say afterwards.
Yeah, it's good to get that 170-pound division back up and running again. But that, of course, isn't the only fight on the card this weekend. That'll get the lion's share of attention, of course. But there are a load of interesting fights on this fight card this weekend. So what I want you guys to do, pick out an under-the-radar fight, an undercard fight that fans should really be paying a special attention to leading into this weekend's fight. Pick out one of your favorites. Let us know. Goze, we've got 3 more minutes before the end of the show. Lead us off.
All right, for me, guys, it's got to be Caitlin Chikagian and Antonina Shevchenko. I love when there's subplots and storylines involved. And in this one, you have a fighter who just faced Valentina Shevchenko, the sister. So you have that angle of it. Now you have Valentina Shevchenko in there. She has things to worry about, living up to the name, trying to separate herself from her sister. Then how about Caitlin Chikagian and the psychology of being in the cage where the last person that just beat you is only a few feet away from you the whole fight, and you have to relive that memory every time you look over to the corner and see that face. There's so much in there. I kind of love that little bit of drama that goes along with it. So that one's going to keep me intrigued for sure, guys.
Yeah, fascinating dynamic. There'll be some interesting corner cam footage for that one. George, what do you reckon? Pick us out a can't-miss fight from the undercard.
Yeah, I'm going to have to accidentally steal 2, but I don't think I'm going to steal Jon's. And I apologize if I do, but, you know, the flyweight division is dear to my heart. And when I saw Smolka and Elliott's names on there, they're not fighting each other, but when I saw their names on there, I thought, all right, good for the flyweight division. We just had the announcement of Figueiredo versus Benavidez running it back. Cool, let's get this thing going one way or another. But it appears Kenny and Smolka are going to fight at bantamweight. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but at least that's what I looked up. The other fight, though, Elliott is going to fight at flyweight. So I'm just kind of isolated there on those guys. We need to restock the shelves in that division because I definitely don't want it to go away. I think it's been shortchanged by the fans. Trust me, 125 pounds, or even when these guys rehydrate, that 135 to 140 spot. In boxing, I'm telling you, great fighters have come in that. So transfer that over to our sport, and I'm telling you, you guys have to be patient. That division will continue to blossom.
Yeah, it's great to have the fights back in the home of the UFC in Las Vegas. It'll be great to see it in the Apex, that purpose-built facility where it may well end up being the home for many months to come. Jon, give us an undercard fight. What are you looking forward to?
Man, listen, I think there's a lot of interesting names on here, kind of prospects-based kind of talent in here. I look at Spike Carlisle and Billy Quarantillo, man. I think that's going to be a fun one, especially that Spike Carlisle and that crazy laugh of his, man. Hopefully that we get to hear that again. Roosevelt Roberts versus Brock Weaver, another couple of prospects there that I think could make for a very entertaining clash. But for me, the one, if I'm given one, it's Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. I mean, Kevin Holland coming back after just 2 weeks, dropping down a division as well. Such an entertaining guy. I mean, obviously, we were looking forward in Florida to hearing Big Mouth in front of no fans, you know, and the silent arena and just getting to hear all his talk. And he goes in there and picks up a super quick win. So hopefully this one lasts a little bit longer. Daniel Rodriguez certainly seems up to the task of that. But I don't mean to slight Daniel Rodriguez, but I'm really excited about the prospect of Kevin Holland. Not only is he a talented fighter, but just personality, man. And that's what this sport is about, right? Those characters. And, man, what he brings to the table is exciting. So I'm kind of zoned in on that one in this week.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun card this weekend down there at the Apex. A lot of Contender Series graduates on that card. That's all we got time for this week on Spinning Back Clique. A huge thank you, as always, to Jon Morgan, to Gorgeous George, and to Goze. Keep it locked to MMA Junkie all week as we bring you comprehensive coverage of UFC on ESPN 9. And we'll be back to unpack it all right here next week on Spinning Back Clique.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.